still remember that flight like it was yesterday. I remember being in the hotel room and wanting to be home so bad because I had spent a week or more in Florida. And so I had this get there-itis, and because of that, I probably could have made some better decisions with my flight plan. How's it going, everybody? Welcome back to Mojo Grip. Mike here. Today's video, we're going to do something new. I'm going to review my flight that a lot of you have probably seen, and some of you have shared your opinions and your criticism. Now, one thing I should point out is that when I put up a video, particularly my flight videos, there's some errors in those videos. There's some things that you probably look at and like, man, he could have done this differently. Here's the thing, you should probably know that I could easily remove those things in the video, but I purposely always leave them in there. And the reason being that when I make my videos and we edit and we upload, you know, for you, it's for entertainment, right? But for me, I actually get to watch my videos sometimes, and for me it's more educational because I'm able to see some of the things that I can improve on. And also for you, I'm hoping that you can watch some things that are being done in the video and think to yourself, hey, I could probably do this better, especially if you're a student pilot. So that's why I leave some of these errors in the video, and particularly the video I'm going to discuss today, which was my flight from Florida, Sun and Fun, back home to Atlanta, Georgia. You saw some things in that video, particularly the end. You saw how just crazy that landing was. I could have easily just meshed out that part and have a nice golden video for y'all, but I purposely left that part in it, and I was hoping that, you know, some people will ask questions about it or say something about it, and I did read some of those comments. But here's what happened in the background that perhaps y'all didn't get to see. If you remember from that video, I was at Sun and Fun. I went to Sun and Fun, which is an air show that happens every year, and I was there for a few days. On the day that we were supposed to get out, once the show was done, we had a storm come in. And now, knowing my skill level, I thought to myself, okay, you cannot fly safe in this type of weather. So I decided to stay put and wait for the storm to clear out. So I stayed there for 3 days, waiting for the storm to clear out. Now, on the third day, I was so ready to get out of there. Matter of fact, I had started planning my flight from 3 days ago. I would look at the weather every single day just to see, okay, do I have a window? Do I have a window? Do I have a window? Long story short, I didn't. And so on the third day, I saw that, okay, things have cleared out a little bit. And generally, guys, I use an app called ForeFlight to plan my flight. If you are a pilot and you don't use ForeFlight, I don't know why. And they didn't sponsor this video. I just think it's a great tool for any pilot out there for flight planning. Really just plans your entire flight within a few seconds. You can check weather and all this good stuff. So I use ForeFlight every single day leading to the day of the morning of my flight. That morning, I woke up maybe 6 or 7 a.m. and I was staying on top of the weather. Now, the good news was that a lot of the storm had already passed. More so, they were moving the opposite direction. So I remember that day being that we still had some overcast layer of clouds right by the airport where I was at, but I can see the cloud on the app and checking my weather that it was moving further south, and I needed to travel the opposite direction. So that was good. And so as the day went by, I waited another 2 to 3 hours, or so around 10 a.m. I checked the weather again. Lo and behold, even you can look outside the window and see that a lot of the clouds, now there was a huge window, so it was still clouds around, but there was so much space that you can just fly and get on top of the clouds. So I was like, okay, this will be it. So I started planning my flight. Now, two things that I looked at. One, I looked at what the storm was doing. I looked at the cloud layers, and also I was looking at what the wind was doing, which is what gave me pause on this particular flight. Initially, when I first woke up that day, when I checked the winds in my current airport was fairly okay. Now, where I was going to my home airport at LZU, the wind was not okay. At LZU, the runways that we have a runway facing west and we have another one facing east, but the winds were coming from this direction. So we had a good bit of crosswind, and this wind was gusting up to 30 knots. Here's another thing you should know. As a pilot, whenever you're flying any airplane, more particularly single engine or smaller airplanes, the airplane manufacturer has a limitation to your crosswind. You would see in your POH, with this airplane, you're not advised to fly or try to land in any crosswind that's greater than XYZ, 15 knots, 20 knots. When I checked initially, the crosswind at LZU was definitely over what my airplane would withstand. Okay, so let's go to plan B. Plan B, I started to look at neighboring airports. Maybe they had more favorable winds, but that wasn't really the case. So again, my only other option was just to wait it out. So again, I waited a few hours. When I checked the weather again, the wind had died down just a bit. It died down to the point where I was still like this much close to my limitation. That was more than enough for me to get up and go. Here's where I thought I could have made a better decision. So initially, when I first did my flight plan, I did one directly to my home airport, and then I did a backup plan to a neighboring airport at Winder. Now, the reason why I did a flight plan to Winder was not because the winds were better, because Winder, unlike LZU, had runways that were facing north and south. So instead of me having more of a crosswind, I would have more of a headwind, which to me as a pilot, it's more manageable, because if I'm coming into land, all I'm really looking out for is making sure my power settings are good, and I'll probably come in a bit more faster than I would if I have heavy headwind. With a crosswind, you'd have to worry about running out of aileron or rudder controls, which was the case here. I then decided that, okay, Winder would be the favorable airport to land, and so I did a flight plan on that. Halfway to Georgia, I looked at the weather again, and the wind, again, it kept going down, but it was still gusting to high numbers, but it was within the envelope of my airplane. And so I decided to change my plan en route. So halfway there, I'm like, well, if I go land at a different airport, then I'd have to find my way, get an Uber, or whatever the case may be. And I didn't want to deal with all of that. So I decided, you know what, this wind's, I'm within the safety envelope, right? And I decided, let me change my plans and just fly directly to LZU. But here's the thing, I had never actually flown into that type of condition before. I'd never flown into heavy crosswind before, or any crazy windy day like it was on that day. It really depends on who's looking at this. I could have made the safer option and still continue my flight up to Winder, or it was good for me to experience landing in heavy crosswind for the first time. Now, other things that happened during this flight that you may not have seen in the video is I actually learned how to navigate through clouds. This was really the first time. Now, I had flown in clouds or around clouds before, but generally speaking, I'm with an instructor, I'm with a safety pilot or someone who's more experienced than me. But this was one of the first few times that I would fly around clouds by myself. And again, it's not anything hard or crazy, just keep within the rules, and you either stay under the clouds or above the clouds. And so I remember that initially I was at a lower altitude and I was flying a good bit under the clouds. So let's say I was 800 or 700 feet below the cloud layer, but it was so rough. It was so rough that I had to request to go to a high altitude. And so now I'm up above the clouds and I still notice it's still a bit rough. And so I requested another flight, another altitude adjustment. In the end, I ended up like thousands of feet above the clouds and it was smooth like butter. I would say 95% of the entire flight was smooth sailing all the way. Now, the real work started when I was descending and coming into land, which again, you guys can see here, and I invite you to go watch that video if you haven't. And if you see, whenever I was approaching, you can see the plane just bouncing side to side, side to side. Again, that's a result of what the wind was doing on that day. And I remember before I started my descent, one thing that I had at the back of my mind was wind shear. Now, if you learn about wind shear, it is a nasty, nasty thing. And I try to avoid them as I avoid wind shear like a plague, because it really can just take your entire plan and flip it upside down. So wind shear, simply defined, is when the wind suddenly changes direction and speed. That was one of the things that I had in the back of my mind, that there's a possibility for wind shear here. And again, you think of what the wind is doing. We just had storms. We still had storms around, by the way, but again, they were moving in different in the opposite direction. In my mind, I'm thinking, okay, let me keep my speed up, which I don't know if you can tell from the video itself, but I still had, winds just throwing me around. And you saw that as soon as I made it to that runway, I couldn't even touch down because the wind would not let me. Now, again, although I was within my safety envelope for my airplane, my skill level was not up there to battle this thing. Now, obviously, I was able to put the airplane down safely, and it was a first. It really was a learning experience. But what that prompted me to do is I need to work more on my landings. I need to work more on crosswind landings. I imagine, this is a lifetime thing for me. So I always keep that at the back of my mind to train and learn more on these things. Now, what's the takeaway from all of this? I think for me, when I look back on this flight, the first thing that comes to mind is just my decision-making skill, and which all pilots will always have, right? Your decisions, the go or no-go decision is always the most important. And I thought, okay, I initially said I'm not going whenever the storm came through. That was a good decision because I wasn't skilled enough to fly in that type of weather. Or a better decision would have been if I flew in with a safety pilot. That's why you see in some of my videos now, whenever I go to shows and whatnot, I take a friend with me, I take an instructor with me, or someone who's more rated, someone who's more experienced, sit with me. That way, if we run into something, I've got a safety pilot, and also I can learn better. Those are two decisions. One decision I could have made better. The second one, I did decide not to go, which was a great decision. And then the third decision was deciding to fly into conditions that I wasn't really familiar with before. I've never really had to land in heavy winds like that. Now, again, I made it all right, but things could have been different. Would I have changed that decision? Honestly, I'm not sure. But I did think that having the safer bet and landing at a different airport with the runway facing north or south probably would have been a more cushion landing compared to what happened and what you guys saw. Again, I watch these things to make me a better pilot, to improve on some things, and I hope that whenever y'all are watching my videos as well, you can point out these things for yourself and hopefully learn from them. Okay, so that is my review of that flight. I've got a lot more. This flights that I haven't even posted on the channel, but my goal is to use also these opportunities to educate all of us. As I've educated myself, I'm hoping to do that for everybody else who's watching. If you enjoyed the video, please give the video a thumbs up. If this is your first time, be sure to subscribe. Also, make sure you follow Mojo Grip on Facebook. We're live on Facebook. Great way to support the channel. Become a paid member on Patreon or right here on YouTube. I really appreciate it, guys, and I will catch you all on the next video. Peace.